Today, I'm going to show you how to use silicone molds with your glass kiln. Hi, my name's Sarah, I'm a stained glass artist, and today I'm going to teach you a method called freeze and fuse. This method is an alternative to traditional glass kiln molds that are typically made of plaster, ceramic, and metal and can be very, very expensive. I really love this method because silicone molds are super cheap, super easy to get, and come in a massive variety of shapes and sizes. So, pros and cons. Okay, pros. Like I said, they're super cheap, they're super easy to get. You don't have to put kiln wash on them like you do traditional kiln molds, and you rarely get any issues with them getting stuff stuck in them or accidentally ruining them, unless maybe ripping them, but that hasn't happened to me yet. So there are quite a few cons to this method also. The main one being that you need to put them in a freezer, and unless you have a secondary freezer, you're going to be introducing glass into a food area, and so you need to be really careful about making a mess and leaving glass in your freezer. With that being said, this method is also very messy. You're going to get a lot of glass particles everywhere. You're using powdered frit for it, and it just gets stuck everywhere, and it's very, very messy. Once you have made your mold impressions and you put them in the kiln, after they're fired, they do lose a lot of definition and shrink. So you're not gonna get super high detail, and the outcome is a little hit or miss depending on the shapes of your molds. The last con is that you can't do things like slumping, which you can do with traditional molds, because you can't actually put the molds into the kiln. Okay, let's talk about supplies we'll need for this. The first one is your silicone mold. I would try to avoid anything that has any little narrow offshoots or really narrow places, because those tend to shrink and break in the kiln or disappear completely. The next thing you'll need is powdered frit to go in your molds, and it has to be powdered frit, otherwise you're not going to get the details of the mold. Powdered frit comes in a huge variety of colors and from a couple different brands. I prefer Bullseye because all of the stuff that I fuse is 90 COE, and so it's all compatible and I can fuse it all together if I wanted to. The next thing you'll need is some kind of water dropper. I like using these large syringes. I originally bought these to give my dog medicine, but they came in like a 50 pack, so I had a bunch of extra, and these work really great. I find that the larger syringes work better than a normal water dropper because filling the molds with water and a little itty bitty dropper will take a while. And the last thing you absolutely need, which feels silly to say, is you need a kiln, preferably a glass kiln. If you don't have a kiln, you have no way to fire these. A couple of optional supplies that I would recommend you get because they're small and cheap and easy is something to scoop your frit into your molds, and then something to level out the top of your molds so they don't end up lumpy on the back. As far as firing goes, I will put the firing schedule up somewhere on the screen so you can screen cap it or write it down. I also have a free printable firing schedule sheet on my website. If you want to go download it, I have it linked below. The last thing we're going to talk about is glass safety. Glass dust and glass powder can be extremely dangerous, so when you're doing this, you want to make sure you have eye protection and also some sort of face mask on. Realistically, whenever you're working with glass, you should have eye protection on, and if you're ever doing anything that like powders the glass, like if you're etching or using powdered frit, you're gonna want to make sure your face is covered so you don't breathe it in. You'll also want to make sure you clean up really, really well after this project, because when the frit is wet, it's very sticky and it gets everywhere, but then once it dries, it is powder again and you can breathe it in. So make sure you change your clothes, wash your hands, wipe down your workstation really well, because we don't want anyone breathing in powdered glass. Okay, now that I have gone over all of the not fun stuff, let's go out to my workshop and I will show you how to do this. So the first thing I like to do is lay out all of my molds on a tray. Make sure to get your face covering and your eye protection. I put all my molds out on this tray so I can easily keep the runoff contained and easily move this to my freezer when I'm ready to freeze them. And this is gold mica powder that I'm going to take on a little tiny paintbrush and just dust into all the molds that I want to be gold. Most mica powder has metal particles in it, so it's not going to burn away in the kiln, but it is going to leave a really nice gold luster on our pieces. The only thing I will say is if you are going to use mica powder in your molds, make sure to tap them out into a trash can so it gets off any excess so you don't get weird like air bubbles in it. And the next thing we're going to do is open up our frit, take our little spoon, and we're just going to start spooning that into our molds. And I'm going to overfill them a little bit because once we start adding the water, it's going to compact down. And so you're going to end up using a lot more frit than you think you'll need for these kind of small molds. Once you have your first layer of frit in, you're going to take your water dropper and start gently adding water droplets to the top of that frit until you get sort of a self-leveling kind of slurry consistency. It's hard to see in this video, but when you get the correct amount of water into your mold, it kind of bubbles across the very top and flattens out. And like I said in the intro, these tend to take more water than you think they'll need. So just keep adding until the glass powder has liquefied and leveled out and you start seeing little air bubbles appear on the top of them. And when you've gotten to this point, you can either use a ruler or your hands and start tapping the sides of these on, multiple sides. And if there's any places that it looks like the glass frit didn't get, use something to sort of move it into there. You really, really want to make sure you get all the air bubbles out of these. Otherwise, you're going to lose detail and you have a bigger chance of these breaking apart in the kiln when it's fired. In addition to tapping the actual molds, you can tap the tray, you can sort of gently bang the tray on your work surface. So now we're going to go in with our second layer of frit, and once you put it on, it's instantly going to absorb any leftover water on top of those molds, and that's what we want to happen because we want these molds to have as much frit in them as possible and as little water. And the frit being wet is going to lower the space between the particles so they can get closer together and you can really compact all of that glass frit down. And then you're going to tap again because there's going to be more air bubbles. And if the top looks a little bit dry, you can add a couple more additional drops of water. Okay, once you're happy with the amount of frit that's in them and the amount of tapping you've done, I like to go through and just scrape any extra glass frit back into where the mold is, because the next step is we are going to take a paper towel and press down into the molds to really compact this and get it into every nook and cranny of the molds. Okay, now take your paper towel, and I like to fold it in half, and you're going to lay it over your molds and press down. And this is going to accomplish two things. It's going to remove all the excess water on top of your mold so it's not icy and it doesn't totally disappear in your kiln. And it's going to compact that glass frit down to get a really solid mold of your mold. And now I'm just going to go through and repeat those steps on all the other little molds on my tray. Now you're going to make sure your tray is clean on the bottom and you're going to stick it in your freezer for 2 to 3 hours. Okay, after they come out of the freezer, you're going to start to demold them, and you're going to do this by very gently peeling back the edges of those silicone molds because this frozen glass is very fragile still. And if there's any pieces like overhanging the edge, you can take your fingers and very gently break those off. This is going to be easier to do now than it is after they are fired. Another thing is when you're placing these in your kiln, you can place them very close together because they are going to shrink a little bit and there's not a lot of risk of them spreading and sticking to each other. And here's what they're looking like before they're fired. Okay, so now we're gonna close the kiln, turn it on, and we are going to set our freeze and fuse program to run. Again, if you need my firing schedule, it's in the comments, and I also have a link to a free firing schedule worksheet that you can download. Okay, so here we are about 12 hours later. The kiln has come back to room temperature, and here's how our pieces are looking. Like I said in the intro, they do lose a lot of their detail and shrink quite a bit, but they still have a really nice texture and you can still see all of the main features from the mold. And here's an example of one that was a little bit thin in the middle, and so when it shrunk, it just kind of broke apart. And the thing about the freeze and fuse process is that not all of your pieces are going to make it, but sometimes you get things that come out of the kiln and are really surprising and amazing and beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you go forth and use all of the silicone molds to make all the weird little glass pieces your heart desires. If you like this video and want to see more glass videos from me, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. And until next time, goodbye!